Do it.
Welcome back to the show, Business Mastery for Startups, Scale-Ups, and Early Stage Businesses with your host, Jerry Gadori. That's me. And this week we have Derrick Girard with us. Now, Derrick has a pretty interesting background. You might find some of it pretty similar to mine. Former military. Now, he came from financial services. I came from technical recruiting. But former military, technical services, started a tech company, sold a tech company, and now wrote the book Put to the Test. Derrick, can you follow up that less than perfect intro and share a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, first of all, I think it was a pretty good intro.
Thank
It,
you.
it is interesting when you and I first spoke, the similarities there. I think a lot of that encompass what I went through. There's one major piece that I think it might have been missing, and that was the number of lawsuits that I faced in my tech company that ultimately led to me writing this book. But yeah, I mean, you got it right on. Military, financial services career that led to a tech company to solve a problem. And then ultimately culminated in me selling that after all the litigation was over with and writing the book about it.
Gosh, litigation, knock on wood, is something I've been able to stay away from. But you
Yeah.
said something interesting there before writing the book, and that's solving the problem. You know, I work in the startup and early stage business space, and while most of my clients are technology services, I do have some tech product companies as well. And I've seen it a couple of times where it seems like, and maybe this is an outside in perspective, but it seems like they got married to this incredible technical solution they created, and the only thing they lack is a problem to solve. And
Yeah.
I see that, I'm like, it feels backwards to me.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see when you go through it and then you see it sort of done in different ways. I always say there's a right way and a wrong way to start a business. And one of the things that I've been lucky enough to do, and this isn't just recently, but over the years, I've been lucky enough to be invited on college campuses to speak, and I love speaking with entrepreneurship students. And the word entrepreneur is very interesting to me because I don't know that I've ever really called myself that, but these students are learning all about what it means to be an entrepreneur and what it means to be a business owner. And a lot of times they can get so enamored and so excited with it that it's kind of to your point, they kind of go about building the business backwards. And so it's interesting when you Google, why does startups fail or success rates for small businesses, and the fail rate is so high, right?
93%.
Yeah, when you see that fail rate as high as it is, you start to wonder, okay, well, why is that? And then you go through the list of all the different reasons a startup fails, and it's lack of financing, they run out of cash, they have people problems, poor timing. But the number one reason is lack of market need. And that to me is just sort of the most important highlight of all those different failure reasons is how many people do it the wrong way, how many people go about it backwards, and that ultimately lends itself to a higher rate of failure, in my opinion.
100%. You know, it's interesting, and maybe interesting in the ancient Chinese curse sense of the word. May you live in interesting times. But 93% of startups fail, and of that 7% live, less than 15 will ever break $10 million dollars in revenue.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of it, to your point, to what I'd like to talk about today, is how they started it all.
Yeah.
Another one, and this is really where I come into play, and we could talk about it another day, is the teams that they build. In technology services, especially, there is no secret sauce other than the team that you build. And that's really what my jam is. But I think we can agree that starting a business with a solution in mind, seeking a problem, isn't the answer. What
Yeah.
would you say the right way to start a business is?
Well, let me tell you how I did it, if that's okay, and then I'll
You,
let itself.
you
Yeah,
built and sold, so I'll say yes.
yeah. So for me, what happened was when I was in the financial services industry, I ran into this situation. Honestly, is it seems fairly simple, but I was an advisor, and my clients would text me. As weird as that sounds, they would text communicate with me. And back then, there wasn't a solution that was compliant that allowed me to communicate through text, right? So I could either do it out of compliance and risk getting in a ton of trouble, or tell my clients that I can't text. Turns out they don't care; they do what's convenient for them, and unfortunately, that wasn't following the rules. And so a solution didn't exist. And so I felt compelled to create one. And when I created it, I then took that solution to my entire network and said, hey, here's the problem I'm pretty sure we're all facing. Is this true? Are you guys facing this problem? And here's a solution I'm building. And I realized when I did that, it wasn't just me that needed the solution, it was everybody. And so it started with identifying the problem. It started with identifying the solution. And in my case, I had to create it. And that led ultimately to the creation of the business. So it was 1, 2, 3, and that was how we did it. And so lack of market need could never be a reason we failed, right? Because I knew there was a massive need. The flip side of that, and what I see, unfortunately, all the time, is again, we'll use these students as an example. Someone that recently graduates from school is they get so enamored with being an entrepreneur. And there's a recent example that I met with these students that wanted to be an entrepreneur. They were so excited and they put their heads together and said, okay, we're going to be business owners. We're going to be an entrepreneur. Now, what business can we go into? Right? And they just sat around going, we know what the end result is. We're going to be entrepreneurs. What are we going to do? And they decided to create a window washing company. But they had no idea who they were going to work with. They didn't know if they were going to be commercial, residential. They didn't know how they were going to make sales. They didn't know where the need was or what kind of need existed. And after they bought all the equipment, created the LLC, they sat back and went, how do we get clients? How do we get people to even know we exist? How do we even find out if people want what we do? And it's just, that was the 3, 2, 1, right? Create the business, solve the problem. Now I hope like hell I can find the problem, right? I'm trying to find the problem and see if it works.
Yeah, that's worse than my example. At least in my instance, these people love the solution they came up with. The folks you're describing probably don't even know if they want to wash a window.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's, it's interesting. You've got two separate things that I'd like to take apart. So the first is the finding the problem and then creating the solution.
Yeah.
That one I understand better because you see the same thing. We're both authors. You see the same thing with books. If you're not careful, you write your book in a bubble and you get to the end and realize you wrote the book for yourself.
Yep.
And it's the same problem, that you described. My son is a musician. He plays a guitar and sings in a band. And he does the same thing. He writes music with his band and realizes that they're really writing the music for themselves and not necessarily for their audience.
Yeah.
So it's easy to get trapped inside of your head as a small business owner or an entrepreneur. The second thing you talked about, I think might be the more interesting one. And that's, gosh, there's such a mystique around being an entrepreneur now. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, and I don't say this to be a Debbie Downer or some kind of gatekeeper, most people shouldn't be entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. Or at the very least, if they should follow a path like we did. We worked careers before we found, something that we started a business around. Because that life experience that you gain is invaluable. For every Zuckerberg or Gates that drops out of an Ivy League school with very wealthy parents, the rest of the folks don't have the life or business skills, acumen, or gravitas to lead a group of folks in that kind of an endeavor.
Yeah, honestly, even easier example, we saw this in COVID, right? I mean, not only should a lot of people not be entrepreneurs, a lot of people can't even work from home, right? Mm-hmm. It's like this remote thing. People think something like that, as easy as that sounds, is actually easy to do. It's really hard just to be able to focus in your own home office. And so the idea of starting a business, that's the one thing I love talking about when I go speak to business owners or small businesses or whatever it might be, is I love talking about the reality of starting a business. So this is great. You learn all about the great things of being your own boss and having a fancy title on LinkedIn and making all the decisions. Now let's talk about the reality. And that's kind of what this book was about, was so many people wanted to know, Derrick, how did you survive all of that? How did you not have a tech background? How did you deal with all these lawsuits? How did you land all these massive organizations? How in the world did you do that? And it was because this mindset that I have of what I call the figure it out mindset, most entrepreneurs and most people don't know how to properly apply that. So when they get hit in the mouth, right, which is the easiest sort of cliche, what do you do? And a lot of people aren't prepared for that. they're thinking about the exciting, great parts of being an entrepreneur, and they sort of skip over the reality of the challenges you're going to face along the way.
100% agree. And I think it's made worse by shows like Silicon Valley, which, by
Oh
the
yeah.
way, is hilarious.
Yep.
But they portray a fantasy that most people will never see.
Yep.
So I couldn't agree more. Why don't we talk more about that mindset that you described?
Yeah.
I think that would be useful.
So it's one of the things that I've said for many years, and I sort of grew up. I grew up military. I was military. I traveled a lot as a kid. I was, when you get plucked out of one state and one country and thrown into another, figure it out isn't just something you say. It's literally something you do. You don't have a choice. And so I kind of grew up with that mentality. And as I was going through my professional career, and especially in building this tech company, I had to figure everything out. And what I say all the time to people is, a lot of the times the word or the phrase figure it out is used. It's used almost as a replacement for not my problem, right? That's kind of the nice thing.
Yeah,
So
that's a good observation.
it's really interesting when somebody's like, you figure it out. That's their way of saying not my problem. Well, the reality is, and what I stress to people starting a business or building a business, what do you do when it is? Like, what do you do when nobody else is going to solve this for you? What do you do when nobody else is going to build what you need built? You have to do it yourself. And that's where this mindset comes in. And I love talking about it because it's not a checklist. It's not like a step 1, step 2, step 3, because every challenge or every phase in this building a business, you might find yourself going back to the beginning of being more self-aware and things like that. But it's a mindset that I think is really important. And I firmly believe everybody has it. It's generally activated under extreme stress and tension, but it's there. And you just have to know how to recognize, are you applying it properly? Are you applying it on time? And, perfection's not the goal. That's just impossible. But it's just, how do we get better at recognizing how to figure things out in a manner that makes it easier.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think that there's a combination of things that creates the person that's capable of doing what you're talking about. Desire, resilience, stick-to-itiveness, grit.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of things. And frankly, I've said this to many people. I know it's distasteful to admit that you're a biased person, but I'm biased towards veterans for just that reason.
Yep.
Most veterans have that in the background, even former Air Force guys. I love inter-service rivalry. I think if the world worked more like the military did,
Yep.
we can tease each other constantly. I can call you a zoomie. You can call me a crayon eater. And we
Yep.
can laugh at each other, but somebody else walks in the bar, we're shoulder to shoulder. I think
Yep.
the world would be a better place. But anyway, yeah, no, I think again, in seriousness about veterans, it's just part of the nature of the military. I used to joke all the time. In the Marines, I swear they did it intentionally. Anytime we go to the field, we had 80% of the things we needed, and we
Yep.
had to figure the other 20% out. And
Yep.
again, to this day, I think it was done with intent for just that reason.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is important, and it will drive my kids and my wife crazy, is I'm a very black and white guy, right? It's either yes or it's no.
Yes.
And a lot of times when you're going to start a business or you're going to take on some massive, challenge in life, whatever it is, get out of the gray, right? Don't dip your toe into it. Don't just say, I'm going to try it and see if it works. Because every time you do that, the second it stops working or it gets hard, you're like, oh, it didn't work, and I move on.
Yep.
And so I absolutely stress to people, when you go down this path and whatever it is, again, whether it's personal or professional, commit yourself to it. Like, honestly, truly commit yourself to it. And it's amazing if you actually remove the gray, and if you remove all the other alternatives you kind of keep in the background, you commit yourself to it. It's amazing what you're capable of if you can mentally make that leap of faith.
I don't necessarily recommend my path. I'm more of a cautionary tale than I am a source of inspiration, I think, in most instances.
Yeah.
But I will say this. When I started my first business, I was in the process of buying a house, which, if anyone knows, in the United States, buying a house when you're self-employed, not easy or great. So I waited for my mortgage to close. I moved in my house, and the first thing that I did, no lie, no exaggeration, the first thing that I did when we were completely moved in and set up was I resigned from my job. The very first thing I did was resigned and officially started my company.
Yep.
So I literally, I burned the bridges. I was in 100%. I don't know that that's the best path. Again, it worked for me. But what I do think at the very least, to your point, give yourself a period of time. This is 100% of what I'm doing until one of these three criteria is met. I hit this monthly ARR. I'm out of cash. I spent 2 years. Whatever it is, give yourself a criteria that you're 100% involved in, period, full stop, until something happens. But if you're just doing it as a side hustle or I want to see how it goes, I couldn't agree more. As soon as it gets hard, as soon as you have your first ugly week, you're gonna cut bait.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, when it comes to that, is for me, a lot of it has to do with what is a goal? What's a good goal? And I think a lot of people, that's one of the other massive mistakes people make, especially in personal challenges, is the way we set goals is based on the end, right? And to me, the proper goal and be able to apply this black and white more appropriately is the goal is the input, not the output. And so for me, my goal, like I'll give you an example. I faced 3 lawsuits at the exact same time, 2 of them federal and 1 of them state. As I sat in my office at the beginning of 2020, the idea of winning 3 lawsuits was so overwhelming and so daunting. You just sort of curl up in the fetal position and go, there's no way one person can handle this, right? But I didn't do that. The goal was very simple. It was all the inputs along the way. Here's what I need to do by this day. Here's what I need to know by this day. Here's what needs to be done by this day. And so whether that's business or, even people that go to the gym or trying to get back in shape, it's not, I want to lose 30 pounds. It's, I want to get to the gym 4 times this week. And then I want to stop buying the garbage food to have in my pantry. So it's tempting me every day, right? It's the little things that you do along the way that make up the end result. And I think that's the other part of getting black and white is finding ways to set goals to say either I did it or I didn't. And I was talking to somebody the other day, their goal was to read 25 books by the end of the year. That was the goal they set at the beginning of the year. It's the beginning of May and they're halfway through their first book. And you go, okay, so you either throw the goal out, but what if you just said my goal is to read 20 pages a night?
Yeah, or an hour a day or something like that.
So what if that was the goal? Wasn't the number of books. It was, I just want to read 20 pages a day before I go to bed or whatever it is, right? That's the input. And you'd be amazed at where you end up because all of a sudden you find yourself flying through 20 pages and you're reading 40. And before you know it, you read 25 books. So that's the other part, I think, when it comes to goal setting and the FIO mindset and being black and white is being really smart about how you set goals and what is a goal, what's an appropriate goal.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when I'm training new people, managing outcomes is impossible anyway because they don't have any, won't for a period of time. So we always manage activities. I need you to do X of this every day, Y of that every week. My commitment to you is if you do that, you're going to get this outcome statistically. Might not be right off the bat, but you'll get there. And so we manage to those, and you have so much more success, in part because the person feels empowered, because they can control what they do. They can't control if a candidate picks up a phone. They can't control any of those things. Excuse me. So yeah, no, I think that's huge. Let me ask you this before we get too far afield. If you could give any business owner, because it sounds like you've got a lot going on, if you could give any business owner one piece of advice, what do you think that would be?
Yeah, it's such an unbelievable question. My advice would be find and surround yourself with other people that have done it. And what I mean by that is over the course of my career, I've had when I tried to build my first business and then when I built this one, you sort of network and you meet a lot of people that might run businesses, that might run companies, that might have fancy titles, but they didn't build it. And it's nothing against those people, right? They're probably phenomenal leaders and great people, but it's hard and it's impossible to understand what somebody is going through when they're building the business. If you ever watch Shark Tank, you see these people standing on that stage and you can feel what they're going through. You can hear it in their voice because you've been there. And so my advice to anybody is find yourself a network of people. And I strive to be this for anybody that needs it, that has been through it, that when you're down in the dumps and you're frustrated, this person can talk to you about how not to give up and persevere and keep pushing through and give you guidance and advice. They can just be a sounding board. Or when you're looking for ways to improve, that person's been there. They understand what you're going through and they can help you through to the other side. So my advice is to find those people that have been through it and make sure you lean on them and leverage them as best you can as you're building this thing, especially when it gets tough.
I talk so much about the power of community, about advisors and mentors. And the thing that you said that I like the most is make sure they've done what you're trying to do.
Yep.
It's people will give you so much bad advice that they sincerely believe is helpful.
Yep.
If you're not careful, you'll drown with that. That's excellent advice. Now, we've covered kind of a lot of topics. Are all of these things in your book put to the test?
Yeah, most of that is in there in some way, shape, or another, broken down into the chapters and what I think are important, lessons or just different things that I want to share. Yep.
And so who is that book for? Who's the target audience?
So it's kind of a generic audience in the sense that the book was written for people in personal and professional situations. And what I talk about in the book is anybody that's going through a midlife challenge. And I use that word very specifically, not a crisis, because crisis is usually an identity problem, right? Like, who am I and where do I belong? A challenge is something different, right? I'm professionally or personally running into this obstacle or this barrier, and I'm struggling with trying to figure out how to move past it. That's what I wrote the book for. So it generally fits sort of middle-aged people. I'm 43 years old, so you take those people that have had some life experiences that understand what a real challenge is, right? That's what this book is for. That's who this book is for, is to help them understand, in my opinion, based on what I've been through personally and professionally, and I talk about both, what the FIO mindset actually means and how you apply it.
That doesn't sound generic at all. It sounds like it's targeted towards an audience that's going through a rough patch, that's looking through to get to the other side better than they got into it.
Yeah, and the feedback has been really good from people that have read it, and they've basically said the same thing. So the way I phrase it, they really like. They can see how they can apply it personally and professionally. So that's been really cool to receive.
That's awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to share? I feel like we've covered quite a bit of material today.
The only thing I would say is, when I talked about how important it is to surround yourself with those people, that's just really good advice, I think, when you're building a business especially. I'm very open and honest with everybody about what I went through. And the biggest mistake I made, Jerry, was when I was hit with these lawsuits, I didn't leverage my network. In fact, I shut everybody down. And the company kept growing, which was phenomenal, but I didn't want my problems to be somebody else's burden. And so I always say it takes a very special and stupid kind of person to do it the way I did it, because it's a lot of stress to put on one person. It's a lot to try to deal with when you have to be, kind of both angels on your shoulders at the same time, and you have to manage everything mentally and emotionally. And so when I was done and I sold the company and then I wrote the book, it was amazing to me how many people reached out and said, I had no idea what you were going through. I had no idea what you were dealing with. I wish you would have told me. I would have helped. I would have been there. And I missed that. I should not have done it that way. And so it just made it a lot harder for me than it needed to. And I don't recommend anybody do that, which is why I go out of my way for anybody dealing with this stuff to say, I'm happy to help. If all you need to do is just vent at somebody and just, here's what I'm dealing with, I'll be the guy on the other end of that phone, just let you do it, because I needed it and I didn't have it. I had it, I just didn't use it.
Yeah, guilty. I'm the same way. I don't know if it's because I'm a Gen Xer in my 50s. I don't know if it's because I grew up kind of, I wasn't an only kid as part of a family, but I was very much a solo kid. I don't know if it's because I'm a former Marine. I don't know if it's because I was raised by a former Marine. I don't know what it is, but I'm the same way. If things are good, I'm out there and sharing. If things are bad, I climb in a hole and pull it closed around me. I'm super guilty of that. I'll tell you, the power of community is amazing. And I say this often. I have very few professional regrets, but easily my biggest is not taking my professional network more seriously earlier in my career.
Yep.
It's so powerful. I speak with lots of folks often on this show and other people's shows, and often people ask questions around people just starting their career, and I always tell them the best thing you can do for yourself as an early stage person is to start building a professional network as early as you can.
Yep. I agree.
Well, listen, Derrick, it's been great talking to you. You've been a wonderful guest. Where can people who want to learn more about you and your book, Put to the Test, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I've got a website, and you can contact me right at that website. It's derrickgirard.com, first and last name. And there's information on how to find the book, more information about the book itself. And again, if you want to reach out, if you're looking for a speaker or somebody to talk to based on whatever it is you're looking for, you can reach out to me there, and I'm happy to to respond and take it from there.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, I will put those two places in the show notes so folks don't have to crash their cars looking for them now. Longtime listeners will know to look there. New listeners will now know to look there. Please reach out to Derrick. He's been an amazing guest, and we did get to speak earlier. He's just as great off camera as on. So I look forward to reading your book. I actually ordered it off of Amazon yesterday. So
Awesome.
I look forward to reading your book, and I'll have more to talk to you about after I've done.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to your feedback.
Awesome. Thanks very much.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.